Alara believed, from the bottom of her heart, in the common platitude that time heals all wounds. The deep, low-frequency vibration of the jet engines filled the spacious business-class cabin. Under the soft lighting, her 5-year-old son Leo pressed his face against the window, his eyes wide with wonder at the sea of white clouds below. "Mommy, this is amazing, we're above the clouds." Her son's excited voice gently warmed Alara's tense heart. She smiled softly and stroked his small head, but her gaze wasn't on the business proposal open in her lap. It was fixed on a place far different, on the back of the man sitting diagonally across the aisle from her. It had been 5 long years since that night of bitter arguments and torrential rain, the night her connection to William Ashford was supposed to have been severed completely. Her ex-husband. The man who, as the designated heir to the immense Ashford Holdings real estate empire, had coldly discarded her. Dressed in a dark navy, impeccably custom-tailored suit, his silhouette still radiated the same intimidating aura that kept the world at arm's length. When he moved his powerful arm, a mechanical watch that had to be worth tens of thousands of dollars gleamed dully from his cuff. It was a stark reminder that the inexpensive watch she had once bought him with her first-ever bonus was now well and truly gone from this world, a ghost of a forgotten past. Why, of all places, did they have to run into each other in this pressurized metal tube 30,000 feet in the air? An awful chill, like an icy blade sliding down her spine, ran through Alara. She had once imagined that if they were ever to meet again, a wave of hatred so intense it would make her stomach churn would rise up. But now, feeling her ex-husband's presence across the aisle, Alara's heart was, to her own surprise, eerily calm and cold. It wasn't hatred, nor was it lingering affection. It was the frigid disdain one holds for a creature living in a completely separate universe, an unrelated being. He seemed completely oblivious to her existence, his arms crossed and his eyes closed in heavy thought. All she wanted was to reach their destination in Switzerland without him ever noticing her. That would be enough. Alara bit her dry lip, trying to steady her trembling breath as if to convince herself. But that small prayer was shattered by a blow so cruel and inescapable it was almost theatrical. A lead flight attendant, her hair in a perfect chignon and her uniform immaculate, moved with a soft, sure-footed grace down the plush carpet of the business-class aisle. She came to a halt right between Alara's and William's seats. Then, with a practiced 5-star smile directed at the man with his eyes closed, she inclined her head slightly. "Mr. Ashford, it is always a pleasure to have you fly with us. Thank you for your continued loyalty." At the sound of the flight attendant's crisp, professional voice, Alara sensed William slowly opening his eyes. But the truly unbelievable moment came next. The chief flight attendant's gaze slid sideways, landing first on Alara's face, and then, in turn, on her son Leo, who was still innocently gazing at the scenery outside. The attendant's smile widened, becoming even more gracious as she gave another slight, deferential nod. "And Mrs. Ashford and your son, we are so pleased you could make your flight. We've been expecting you. For your family trip to Switzerland, please do not hesitate to let us know if there is anything at all we can do to make your journey more comfortable." A violent, percussive sound echoed in Alara's chest, as if her heart were about to explode. The blood in her veins turned to ice in an instant, and a powerful shiver shot from the tips of her toes to the back of her head. A ringing, louder than the jet engines, roared in her ears. Unconsciously, her hands clenched the fabric of her skirt, her knuckles turning white as they trembled. "Mrs. Ashford and your son." Her mind went blank. 5 years ago, she was the woman who had endured countless humiliations from his family, the woman thrown out of the Ashford estate with the life growing inside her, abandoned by William himself. She had paid for this very plane ticket with money she earned through her own blood, sweat, and tears. How on earth could a flight attendant she had never met recognize them as his family without a moment's hesitation and offer this bizarre special treatment? But the horror didn't end there. The moment the flight attendant uttered those impossible words, William's shoulders, sitting diagonally in front of her, jolted as if he'd been shot. Then, with the slow, horrified movements of a man seeing a ghost, he slowly turned to face her. Their eyes met across the aisle. There was no time to compose himself. Reflected in her own gaze was the pitiful figure of William Ashford, the color drained from his face in utter shock and confusion, his mouth hanging half open, speechless. Apparently, the man before her was just as clueless about this situation. If that was the case, then who? Who had investigated their flight details, their itineraries, down to the very seat numbers, and orchestrated this skin-crawling setup? The presence of an unknown, shadowy puppeteer began to fill the high-altitude chamber with a thick, suffocating darkness. In the face of this abnormal pressure, Alara couldn't even make a sound, her body frozen rigid. "What are you doing here?" William's low, incredulous whisper was barely audible. Whether it was the change in cabin pressure or the turbulence of the moment, her mind was dragged back into the abyss of memory. It had been 5 years since she had last seen that cold, bloodless expression on his face, the same color in his eyes as when he had sneered, "You're not fit for this family," casting her aside like a piece of trash. And most of all, the final, decisive words he had hurled at her himself flashed back, searing her chest. "This isn't the right time for a child. My father's health is failing, and the company is at a critical juncture. We don't have the resources to deal with your pathetic little melodrama and the demands of a pregnancy." Those were the icy words of rejection he had spoken to her in the dim, sunless bedroom, just after she had tearfully told him she was pregnant for the first time. Worse, just a few days later, while sorting laundry, a high-end hotel keycard, a size of a business card, stained with an unfamiliar shade of red lipstick, had slipped from his pocket into her hands. The moment she saw it, the man she thought she loved transformed into a cold-blooded, fractured stranger. For Alara, who had been teetering on the edge of a mental breakdown amidst the lonely, isolating life as a bride in a powerful family, a fierce, protective instinct as a mother for the small life growing inside her took over. She demanded nothing. She accepted not a single dollar of their sordid settlement money. Clinging to her own tattered pride and a single maternity dress she had just bought, she fled their New York world. Disowned by her own parents and scorned by society, she walked alone through the neon-lit streets at night, gritting her teeth against the crushing loneliness. The memory was as fresh as yesterday. The searing pain of labor endured alone, the hot tears she shed on the sterile, anonymous hospital bed when she heard the faint cry of her newborn. For William, it was surely a long-buried memory. But for Alara, it was a brand, seared onto the back of her skin, impossible to erase. "Mommy?" Her son's anxious voice pulled her back to reality. As Alara looked down, startled, Leo's small hand gently tugged at her rigid arm. "Mommy, that man over there is staring at us. Is he someone you know?" At his son's innocent question, William's shoulders flinched violently. He had been silent the whole time, seemingly calculating, processing her presence. The meaning of being called Mrs. Ashford and your son. The 5 years that had passed. The estimated age of the boy looking up at her with a curious expression. Putting it all together, even someone as dense as him would have to realize the truth. This boy was the life he himself had ordered her to dispose of. So that was it. She finally understood the strange, persistent feeling of being watched, not just from the moment the flight attendant spoke, but for minutes before. He had been watching them the whole time, observing them while hiding his own selfish, cruel past. "No, sweetie, he's nobody," Alara said, intentionally lowering her voice to a cool, detached tone, a vocal wall slamming down. It was a complete declaration of severance aimed at William. "He's just looking our way by mistake. Don't worry about it." Locking eyes with him for a single, emotionless second, she gave a smile as cold and blank as a mask, then pointedly turned away to check her son's seatbelt. The strength to overcome those days that were as bitter as mud was mine and mine alone. "It doesn't matter if you're the CEO now. You will never be allowed to touch my life again." The mystery of the chief flight attendant's bizarre welcome remained unsolved, but a wall of rejection, a cold, focused resolve, now formed in Alara's mind, aimed squarely at the man in front of her. She wouldn't let him lay a single finger on them. But as the plane began its slow descent, the sound of a service cart rattled through the cabin. Mixed with the noise, a quiet footstep approached from the aisle. Looking up, Alara saw a tall shadow leaning out from his seat, looming over them in a way that was almost menacing. It was William Ashford, the man once so cold and proud, now wearing an expression akin to desperation as he encroached upon her space. "Alara, that boy, he's not?" The question came out in a strained, hoarse whisper. Alara's expression became a complete blank. She knew exactly where this was going. Gritting her teeth to keep the hatred from erupting, she coldly sharpened the aim of her next words, ready to teach him that no matter what his intentions were in approaching her, it was a fatal miscalculation. "He's not my son, is he?" The moment that selfish, direct, and utterly proprietary question hit her ears, what Alara felt was not the pain of a past love betrayed. It was a bottomless rage, an exasperation so profound it was almost nauseating. welling up from the depths of her soul. The man who had callously thrown his wife and child out, who hadn't even attempted to acknowledge their existence for 5 years, not with a single phone call, was now, on a chance encounter on an airplane, claiming a connection of blood. His anguished expression, as if he were the tragic hero of some cheap melodrama, grated horribly on Alara's nerves. "Your method of greeting seems to lack a certain professional courtesy, Mr. Ashford." Alara's low, clear voice dropped into the cabin's quiet. William's eyes widened, a look of bewilderment clearly shadowing his face. Far from being intimidated, Alara's gaze was one of complete condescension, and it sliced through his words, leaving them stuck in his throat. "You always were rather self-absorbed, Mr. Ashford. Don't get the wrong idea. The only relationship that exists between you and me is a single divorce paper, finalized 5 years ago without a single dollar of alimony. There is no karmic thread strong enough to bind the existence of a child to that." The formal language and absolute rejection in her tone made William's back stiffen. He stared past her tall frame, his eyes, however, trembling with anxiety, fixed on Leo, who was now quietly occupied with a tablet. It was as if he was trying to confirm the Ashford bloodline in the boy's fair skin, the structure of his face, the faint echoes of his own younger self. "But back then you were pregnant, and the child's age, it all seems to—" "And what if it is?" Alara shot back instantly, her gaze as cold as ice. It was a ferocity unique to a mother, a creature living to protect her young. "Just because I am traveling to Switzerland with my son, if you intend to interfere with my business or spread unpleasant rumors, I will not be merciful. Do you have any idea what I went through? How I worked day and night until I was worn to the bone, how I stayed up until the early hours of the morning drawing designs to raise this child. Don't you dare speak to me as if you know anything." Just after she spat out the last sentence, William, overwhelmed by her icy aura, stumbled back half a step. Other passengers glanced at them with curiosity. Had any employee of Ashford Holdings seen their president cowering inside his perfectly tailored suit, they would have fainted from shock. But the problem didn't end there. Noticing the movement of a flight attendant pushing a cart down the aisle, Alara's mind snapped back to a state of taut attention. The special treatment from before, and the fact that William was so shocked he had to question Leo's existence, was proof that he hadn't orchestrated this himself. Then who? Who had fed the cabin crew the information that William Ashford's wife and child would be on this flight? Judging by the chief attendant's language, which clearly assumed they were a couple traveling together, this wasn't an internal airline mix-up. It was pressure, applied by a very powerful external force. Who was doing this? And for what purpose? As long as this bizarre hospitality game was being played behind the scenes, she couldn't rule out the possibility of danger to her business in Switzerland, and more importantly, to Leo's safety. "Pardon the interruption, Mr. Ashford. And for you, madam, the special red wine you requested." Another flight attendant, at the worst possible timing, approached them, again using that bizarre title, and offered a glass on a tray with a beaming smile. "Our finest grand crew. I am not his wife, or anything of the sort," Alara said, her voice just loud enough to be firm without causing a scene. The attendant only frowned slightly. "My apologies, but this is a VIP arrangement handled directly from upper management," she insisted, trying to deflect. An uncontrollable, unsettling feeling filled the cabin, but Alara's anger had a clear target. Not the flight attendant, but the man beside her who was the source of this mess, and whoever was pulling the strings to curry favor with him. A non-negotiable fury. The aircraft banked gently, and the fasten seatbelt sign illuminated, signaling the start of their descent into Zurich Airport. At the sign, William silently, unsteadily, retreated to his own seat. As the arrival announcement echoed through the cabin, Alara's nerves were stretched to their breaking point. It was clear the special treatment was due to someone's influence, but no matter whose orders they were, Alara knew what she had to do. As long as that man was involved, she would reject it all with every fiber of her being. The muffled roar and vibration of the descent. The woman who stood here now was not the same one from 5 years ago, her heart torn apart by William's words, clutching a single maternity dress and a suitcase. Here now was Alara Vance, founder of Swiss Blue Designs, an interior designer who had fought her way up from freelance gigs for major firms, who had worked through nights so exhausting they felt like drowning, to win her independence through sheer bloody effort. Alara took a deep breath, as if to suppress a tightly wound coil of emotions, and quietly endured the pressure of the descent. Leo, sensing the atmosphere, sat more quietly than usual. "It's okay," Alara whispered, giving her son a small smile. The plane landed smoothly at Zurich Airport, the engine noise fading to a hum. As soon as the deplaning for first and business class began, Alara efficiently gathered their belongings. Without a single glance at William, who stood by his seat without turning, she exited the aircraft. But what awaited them, there was an even more skin-crawling, grotesque performance. As they stepped into the spacious arrivals lobby, the first thing that caught her eye was a line of 4 or 5 uniformed Swiss chauffeurs, who had clearly arrived in a fleet of luxury limousines, standing at perfect attention, and the man at the front was holding a large welcome board. On it, in an ostentatious, calligraphy-like font, were the words, "Welcome, Mr. William Ashford, President, Ashford Holdings, and Mrs. Ashford and family." Alara stared at the bizarre, unhinged message on the board, like something from a royal parade, and for a second, questioned her own sanity, her own place in the world. And then, a furious heat flooded her veins. 5 years of hard work, spun from her own sweat and blood, was being effortlessly packaged into the utterly infuriating and degrading title of Mrs. Ashford. "You have got to be kidding me." The single phrase carried the weight of all her past resentment. William, walking a few paces behind her, saw the absurd welcome sign and his face changed. He rushed toward Alara. "Wait, it's a misunderstanding. I didn't order any of this. This has to be our Swiss counterpart, probably Chairman Schmidt's doing. He's known for being an extreme, family-first kind of guy. He must have had my private life investigated and thought he was being helpful." William's voice was laced with panic at this unpredictable turn of events, and had a distinctly pleading, defensive tone. For Alara, just hearing that weak excuse was the ultimate humiliation. It meant that because of his own sloppy negotiations and lack of foresight, he had allowed the other party to gain leverage over his personal life, and he had failed to protect his own family, even one that was already broken. The lead driver, his white-gloved hand extended reverently, stepped forward with a broad smile. "The Ashford family, welcome to Switzerland. The hotel is ready for you." He moved to take the handle of the rolling suitcase Alara was holding. In that instant, Alara slapped his hand away. A cold, sharp smack. "Don't touch me." Her sharp cry echoed, freezing a section of the lobby. The driver's smile instantly turned into a pained grimace. Then, without flinching, Alara turned to the Swiss welcoming party and, with a perfectly calculated glacial smile, declared in flawless English, "I'm afraid there has been a misunderstanding. There is no Mrs. Ashford here. It seems that due to the unfortunate lack of preparation on the part of the pitiable Mr. Ashford next to me, you've caused an inconvenience for myself and my son. He and I parted ways 5 years ago. You have no right to touch us. We are completely unrelated third parties. Please, by all means, give your grand welcome to the president alone." In the frozen silence that followed, the color of William's face shifted from deathly pale to a deep, flushed red. He was utterly stunned by the intense humiliation and the shock of having his male pride publicly shattered. After witnessing his floundering reaction to this perfectly executed denial, delivered in impeccable English by the one woman he should never have crossed, Alara offered him no chance for a rebuttal. Tightly gripping her son's hand, she turned toward the airport signs. "Let's go, Leo." Without a single backward glance at William, Alara strode purposefully towards the ticket counter for the local train line. The beautiful Swiss wilderness, the high, clear blue sky, and in the distance, the snow-capped Alps, reflecting a brilliant white light. Gazing at the postcard-perfect scenery flowing past the window of the express train, Alara took a slow, deep breath. The moment she had left them at the airport, a pale-faced William, surrounded by a confused huddle of foreign drivers after verbally tearing apart that humiliating welcome sign, an incredible feeling of exhilaration, as if she had been freed from a 5-year curse, coursed through her entire body. The arrogant, controlling power of the Ashfords had no jurisdiction here. The Alara of today was a professional interior designer who earned her own living and could take on the world with her own words. "Don't you dare drag us into your mess." The sound of William Ashford's pride shattering into a million pieces at that moment had been clearly audible to Alara's ears. It was utterly, magnificently satisfying. "Mommy, look at all the goats." Her son Leo's innocent, joyful voice pulled Alara back to the present. "Oh, you're right, they're so cute, aren't they?" She laughed, gently stroking his warm hair. She wouldn't let him see even a hint of the black rage inside her. Although the pressure of the business pitch looming in the latter half of this vacation was real, for now, she needed to enjoy this elegant, fleeting escape with her beloved son. Her break with that man was complete. The story, for Alara, should have ended there. The quaint, rustic lodge at the foot of the mountains near Interlaken, which she had booked, was run by a kind, buxom Swiss woman who greeted Alara and Leo with a warm hug. It was a quiet, soft vacation afternoon. She was sitting on the wooden veranda, sipping hot chocolate, feeling the crisp, clean air, and finally reclaiming a sense of peace, when the entrance of the lodge suddenly grew noisy. With a clatter of heavy footsteps, the well-fed proprietress from the front desk, looking somewhat flustered, hurried onto the balcony where Alara was sitting, slightly out of breath. "Mrs. Vance, a wonderful gift has arrived for you and the little one." What she held out was a thick, heavy, white envelope embossed with the logo of a luxury hotel, and behind her, a young staff member was struggling to carry a gigantic, wrapped present, a box so large it would take an adult's outstretched arms to encircle it. The proprietress explained that it had been delivered as a complete surprise, with no sender listed. Before Alara could even process Leo's sparkling eyes as he saw the box, a sickening chill ran down her spine. Her eyes narrowed. The moment her fingers touched the unmarked white envelope, the blood drained from her face. The pressure of the ink, the handwriting scrawled across it, was something she knew all too well. It was without a doubt the handwriting of William Ashford. With trembling fingers, Alara tore open the seal. What jumped out at her was a long, rambling series of excuses, filled with bitterness and regret. For a moment, she thought it might be a furious letter about the humiliation at the airport, but the contents completely betrayed her expectations. The letter began with, "I am so sorry about the airport. I am truly, deeply sorry." The script was messy. Unlike the arrogant scrawl of the corporate air she once knew, the characters blurred in places from the fierce pressure of the pen. After a self-justifying passage explaining that this whole Swiss trip and the overbearing interference from the old-fashioned Chairman Schmidt was his own mistake, the tone of the pen suddenly became plaintive. "From that day, 5 years ago, until today, I have lived with a regret so painful it gnaws at me. Please, Alara, just tell me some part of the truth. The handsome, intelligent-looking boy who was with you at the airport today, the blood that flows in his veins, is it not Ashford blood? Is it not my blood? Tell me, just that would be enough." The suffocating despair and his ridiculously sentimental plea for her to feel some pity for him, William's lonely and pathetic confession, was proof of how significant she had become to him now, in her absence. But that very fact only planted a deeper seed of revulsion and despair in Alara. This man, who was trying to package all that horrific pain into a box and transform it into a beautiful, sentimental memory for his own consumption, did not deserve to know the answer. "Mommy, this huge box, is it for me? Can I open it?" Leo asked, running over excitedly, his small fingers already on the ribbon. She knew, even if the enormous toy inside cost hundreds or even thousands of dollars, that it was coated with a dark, obsessive claim of bloodline, a poison he was blissfully unaware of. She couldn't possibly let him open it. That letter reeked of the man's unresolved attachments. But in that moment, Alara was caught in the waves of an incredibly difficult dilemma, unconsciously biting her lips so hard she could taste blood. Should she tell the truth? No, if she chose silence now, it would all be over. Her son, his hands on the giant wrapped box, was at the peak of excitement. In the face of Leo's bright voice, Alara's thoughts were in turmoil, like a person clinging to a rock in a raging river. It would be easy to tear off the wrapping paper and throw it all in the trash. But for Leo, who knew nothing, it would be an incomprehensible, cruel, and seemingly random act of anger from his mother. Wouldn't crushing the sparkling joy in her son's eyes be a crime equal to the senseless, brutal rejection William had shown her? "Wait," she said, somehow managing to hide the tremor in her voice, feigning calmness as she placed her hands on the ribbon. "Let Mommy help you open it a little." As the vibrant Swiss blue ribbon fell away, a collection of the highest-end Swiss-brand wooden puzzles and a giant build-it-yourself castle kit worth thousands of dollars was revealed. Even Alara was momentarily taken aback by the sheer magnificence of it all. But it wasn't a pure gift for a child. It looked more like a selfish down payment, a flaunting of arrogant wealth to buy a truth, and it filled her with rage. But then, Alara came to a decision. She decisively pressed the call button on her smartphone. "Hello, Chloe?" The person on the other end was her best friend, and the co-founder of her interior design firm back in New York. Alara poured out the whole story in a torrent of words. "I can't believe it, Chloe. Why do I have to be subjected to him audaciously asking if my son is really his?" As she vented into the phone, a helpless emotion she couldn't place began to well up as tears in her eyes. "Those words he said, abandoning me. claiming his father's illness was too much to handle, the lingering scent of another woman's perfume. And now he wants the truth? After a moment of silence, her friend's voice came back, as hard and unyielding as steel. Alara, wake up. So what if he's sending you some sappy apology and a present now? What does that prove? The reason you're standing in Switzerland right now is because you, alone, raised a child and literally crawled your way up to get work. It's the fruit of your obsession. Don't you dare do something as stupid as sacrificing that hard-earned money and status to his regret and nostalgia. The answer is simple. Tell him, don't get the wrong idea. This is just trash donated out of pity by a complete stranger, and throw it back in his face. Chloe's fierce, unfiltered words completely severed the faint hesitation that had begun to grow in Alara. The oppressive fog that had been collecting in the back of her mind was instantly washed away. Yes, the answer was already there. She would never again be absorbed into that freezing, cold-blooded family. Alara quietly ended the call. She walked over to where Leo was wrestling with the present in the room and sat down beside him, gently cupping his small face in her large hands. Listen carefully. Alara began slowly. This wonderful gift, you know that man at the airport I was a bit harsh to? The one who made a mistake? Well, he sent this to you as an apology for being rude, but that's all it is. We will never see that man again, not for the rest of our lives. So this box is just an apology. Just a little extra something, that's all. It was a story invented on the spot to keep her son from guessing the truth, but in that moment, a fierce, almost terrifying glint of maternal protectiveness shone in Alara's eyes, a vow that she would die before she let her son be taken to that other side. Perhaps sensing this, Leo looked puzzled for a moment, then gave a big nod. Okay, Mommy, I understand, he said with a sweet smile, and went back to the box. This is fine, he is a stranger. It was the moment the old cross that had been at the center of Alara's heart shattered into dust and vanished. The next day, they blended in with the tourists, enjoying a purely beautiful holiday. A few days later, they traveled to their original business destination, the ancient and beautiful mountain town of Zermatt. The purpose of their trip was a meeting for a project that Alara had bet her company's future on, the renovation of a luxury inn owned by a wealthy elderly woman, the matriarch Mrs. Dubois. Their first meeting at a cafe was surprisingly successful. Mrs. Dubois was taken with Alara's proposal, a fusion of modern design principles and the warmth of Swiss tradition, and gave her the highest praise. Your designs don't have a coldness to them. I feel the warmth of a living, breathing pulse, the pulse of a mother. Filled with the joy of having practically secured a major contract, Alara was about to leave when Mrs. Dubois suddenly took an elegant, thick envelope with gold trim from her purse. Tomorrow, an old business partner of mine is hosting a special winter charity ball in this town. He asked me to introduce him to a talented designer with a good aesthetic. Since you're here, why don't you and your son dress up and come along? It will be good exposure. Presented with such absolute goodwill from the matriarch, Alara had no reason to refuse. Seeing it as a huge business opportunity, she accepted the envelope with a deep nod of gratitude. She had no way of knowing that this very invitation was a direct passport to the source of all the evil that had entrapped her on the plane and at the airport. The next evening, the historic castle-like mansion on the outskirts of Zermatt was ablaze with breathtaking illuminations. The warm, amber light tracing the historic walls created a rich, glamorous atmosphere befitting a gathering of the wealthy. Alara wore a simple, A-line silk dress of jet black, her long hair swept to one side. The refined, minimalist attire only served to highlight her underlying confidence and resilient spirit. For 5-year-old Leo, she had chosen a small navy formal suit and tied a tiny bow tie for him. Mommy, I've never been to a party in a castle before. Holding hands with her son, whose eyes were wide with wonder, Alara walked with a confident stride through the high, arched entrance. In the vast hall, a live orchestra played elegant music, and Switzerland's most influential business leaders and beautifully dressed women mingled, champagne flutes in hand. Escorted by her patron, the wealthy Mrs. Dubois, Alara was introduced to one magnate after another, articulating her vision for interior design with eloquence, logic, and occasional humor in fluent English. Her refined demeanor and beautiful presentation quickly won the admiration of the business leaders at the center of the event. As admiring gazes began to turn toward the highly capable and charming designer from the East, Leo, seeing a playroom set up for children, innocently scampered off, asking if he could go play for just a little while. Alone for a moment and wanting a break from shop talk, Alara walked across the plush carpet toward a large window opening onto a terrace. She stepped out to feel the cool mountain breeze, gazing at the inky black forest reflecting the party lights. A proud smile naturally formed on her lips at the unexpectedly smooth start to her business in Switzerland. I climbed this far, all by myself, she thought with a sense of triumph. But in that instant, from behind her, came the unnatural, hurried sound of a shoe sole scraping the floor, followed by a low, strangled curse in a familiar language, hurled at her back. "What the hell are you doing here?" Her heart, as if plunged into ice water, stopped beating from the intense shock. She spun around reflexively. Standing there, his tuxedo bow tie slightly loosened, was William Ashford, literally pale and frozen like a stone statue. His eyes, wide with a violent mix of confusion and bewilderment, were those of a man who had just seen a ghost. The pathetic man-child who had penned that needy, clinging letter on hotel stationery, how in the world had he found his way into this exclusive, closed-off party for the super-rich? In the silence, as they both tried to figure out why the other was there, a boisterous, gratingly cheerful voice with a thick German accent boomed through the air. "Ah, there is our guest of honor, Mr. Ashford." The owner of the voice was a large, portly man with a magnificent mustache, his fingers adorned with several flashy, expensive, jeweled rings. It was the white-haired giant, the host of this castle party, the old business partner, Mrs. Dubois had mentioned. But the moment William saw him, his already colorless face turned another, more desperate shade of pale. He lunged forward, desperately trying to silence the portly man with his hands. "Wait, Schmidt, don't!" The moment William said the name, Schmidt, a fragment of memory sparked in Alara's brain. It was the name of the incompetent and meddlesome Swiss business partner who had orchestrated the bizarre family welcome on the plane and at the airport. Everything clicked into place. Alara's gaze, now burning with a quiet, cold flame, fixed on Schmidt, piercing him. Schmidt, completely misinterpreting William's desperate plea as a joke, pushed him aside and stomped over to Alara's side, a heavy champagne glass in hand. "Well, well, what a magnificent and beautiful surprise, Mrs. Ashford." The orchestra momentarily quieted, and Schmidt's booming voice echoed throughout the hall. Many of the distinguished guests stopped, putting down their wine glasses to see what the commotion was about. William made a gulping sound, paralyzed by shame and extreme tension. Next to him, Schmidt, breathing heavily, began his speech. "It is my greatest pleasure to welcome the lovely wife of my greatest business partner, President Ashford. How did you enjoy the humble hospitality our company arranged for you, starting with the business class flight and the limousine at the airport? I heard you were in a terrible mood at the airport and sent the driver away, which gave me quite a scare." Schmidt let out a huge laugh, trying to show off his cleverness to the crowd. He was the lowest form of human, trespassing on another person's private life and basking in his own sense of superiority. The whole sordid picture of how this trip had been arranged to appease this man for the sake of William's business became clear. All eyes in the room were now focused on them. "Come now, President Ashford. Let's let bygones be bygones and seal our deal with a toast." "No, Chairman Schmidt, please. That's enough," William pleaded, his voice trembling, but his words were cut off. William Ashford was completely under Schmidt's control. In his terror of this public disgrace, he was frantically signaling to Alara with his eyes, begging her to play along, to help him, to stop the train wreck. The same man who had turned his face away when she had desperately sent out her own SOS 5 years ago. It was a grotesque tragedy starring an arrogant, unrepentant man and a pathetic, small-time ex-husband. As the uncomfortable, silent stares of the crowd gathered on her, Alara's cold eyes reached a new peak of dark amusement. "Ilara, please, just play along," William mouthed, his voice a choked whisper. Looking at the pathetic, utterly exposed state of his pride, what Alara felt was not pity, but a complete and utter sense of superiority that sent shivers down her spine. Before her, the man who had once looked down on her, and his crony, were on the verge of groveling in a self-made crisis. The sword of ultimate retribution was already in Alara's hand. It was just as Schmidt, still spewing his rude and misguided praise at Alara, added with a sleazy wink, "With this, I trust you'll be happy to proceed with the multi-million-dollar contract renewal that's been on hold since that night, alongside your husband, that Alara acted." She let out a long sigh, and with a graceful movement, placed her slender champagne flute on a side table. The high, hard sound of glass on wood cut through the ambient noise. Alara straightened her shoulders, lifted her chin slightly, and took 2 slow steps toward the terrace doors. The attention of the several hundred wealthy and important guests was now completely locked onto this beautiful woman in the black dress from Japan. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for this private intrusion on such a beautiful evening, But may I have a moment of your time? Her voice, so clear and full of dignity, carried without a microphone, forcing even the orchestra in the corner of the hall to lower their volume. There was not a trace of hesitation or shame in Alara's voice. In fact, she possessed the commanding presence of a president herself. Mr. Schmidt, or whatever your name is, I have had quite enough of your warm greetings and your thoughtless meddling. Alara's gaze was so powerful it seemed to freeze Schmidt in place for an instant. Then, she shifted her ice-cold stare to William Ashford, who was standing beside him, rigid with fear, as if he were a stone statue. Because you see, I separated from this man, Mr. Ashford, 5 years ago. He is nothing more than a relic of the past. He is not my husband, and he has absolutely no right to be involved in my life in any way. He is a complete and total stranger. So please, do not ever shame my dignity again by referring to me as some sort of lingering ghost from Mr. Ashford's past. A profound, absolute silence fell over not just the terrace, but the entire grand ballroom of the castle. So unexpected was this reversal that even guests from afar stopped with wine glasses half raised to their lips, forgetting to blink as they stared at the trio. Separated? Not his wife? Wait, Ashford, what is the meaning of this? Schmidt's arrogant, bloated face deflated, and he stared at the man beside him like a large, panicking dog. But William himself had already suffered a fatal blow to both his heart and his social standing. His eyes were wide, and he couldn't even make a sound, unable to hide the trembling of his entire body in despair. He had no defenses left to protect himself. Schmidt, trying to recover, stammered, "But the information I had, he knew all about your trip to Switzerland. This must be some kind of mistake, Mrs. I mean, there's no way I could have been wrong about you," he began, trying to desperately explain away his mistake. But Alara blew away his foolish, flimsy excuses with a light, dismissive smile and a single sentence. "And that is precisely why you are the laughingstock here tonight. You boast about relying on your own information, yet you failed at the most basic background check investigating a business partner's family situation, a task that even a rookie sales associate wouldn't neglect. You are, in fact, an incredible incompetent." A direct, merciless declaration of war on Schmidt. From the other businessmen in the hall came gasps and faint, suppressed snickers. "So the old fox finally messed up," came a whisper from a group who clearly disliked him. Realizing the crowd's cruel gaze and the storm of snickers were now directed at him, the pride and arrogance of the great corporate leader, Schmidt, shattered. He began to tremble, looking at his own hands in disbelief. His face was an ugly, mottled red, and he clutched his head in a state of agitation that went beyond mere embarrassment. And the cause of it all, William Ashford, clenched his fist so tightly, he was on the verge of collapsing from the bottomless reality of being completely checkmated by the woman he had once callously discarded. Of course, he himself had been unable to betray his business partner and had been dragged along in this relationship. "It seems your pathetic little game for two has come to an end, along with this party. From now on, please be so kind as to clean up your own mess. I have no obligation to join in your little circle of sycophants any longer." Alara's exquisite smile, her icy condescension, and her perfectly poised, dignified tone were unleashed once more. She turned, the beautiful hem of her black dress swirling gracefully. She offered no more words, no more glances at the wreckage of the past. "Wait, Alara!" William stumbled forward, his hand outstretched toward her elegant back. It was a pathetic, desperate gesture. His trembling hand was just about to grasp the hem of Alara's dress when she spun around, taking a quick step back to maintain her distance, and delivered the final, decisive blow. "And you will stop calling me by my first name. I am the president of Swiss Blue Designs. To you, I am Miss Vance, a CEO you can no longer reach." The crushing fact was there. He had no right to even a fingertip's worth of connection to her. "Let's go, Leo." Alara walked over to the playroom, where her son was peeking out with a curious look on his face, and took his hand firmly. "Oh, are we leaving? Okay." The innocent, unknowing voice of the boy echoed, and after that, only the high, elegant sound of Alara's stiletto heels clicked forcefully on the marble floor. People parted to make way for her, and as she walked away, her back straight and proud, never looking back, a murmur of admiration, like sighs after watching a first-rate film, followed her. In that moment, every single link in the chain of dark black pain that had been inside Alara for 5 years shattered into dust, was carried away by the wind, and purified. It was the complete birth of a new her. As the doors opened and the glittering mad phantom of the castle banquet was shut out behind her, the crisp, clear Swiss night air enveloped Alara's entire body in a refreshing embrace. "Your car is this way, madam." Guided by the polite hotel staff at the entrance, she and her son slipped into the back seat of a sleek black sedan. The door closed with a quiet click. The car began its smooth descent down the hill, and the garish glow of the castle, a world of its own in the dark, gradually receded behind them. Somewhere behind those windows, two men who had lost everything were left to wallow in the wreckage of their own making, to drink the bitter dregs of their well-deserved shame and regret. But not even that could cause a single ripple on the surface of Alara's heart. "Mommy, the juice today was so sweet and yummy, and everyone was wearing such pretty dresses." Her son's excited words, as he gazed at the night sky spreading outside the window, brought a genuine, soft, and confident mother's smile to Alara's previously icy lips. "Yes, it was, wasn't it? Thank you for being such a good boy in a world full of adults. You were a huge help." She hugged her son close, lovingly stroking his small head of soft, golden brown hair. "My treasure, my reason to fight." Even when she had delivered that icy rejection to William, a small splinter of pain had remained in her heart. But now, it was transforming into a sense of peace, the peace of breathing the air of freedom under the night sky with her beloved child. Like ice slowly melting into a warm sea, she felt it quietly and completely purifying her. She had stood on her own 2 feet, used her own words to protect herself and her child from unjust treatment. For the Alara of today, the most beautiful and valuable asset she possessed, more so than the act of revenge itself, was the powerful self-affirmation she had found in the midst of humiliation. The knowledge that she could, with her own will, perfectly redesign the ultimate project, her own life. She vowed to never again let herself be defined by the curse of a narrow, suffocating lineage or the power of fickle men. The next morning, after enjoying a lavish buffet breakfast with her son at the hotel, Alara sat down with a cup of coffee to do some work on her laptop before checkout. Her smartphone, lying face down on the table, vibrated with a short, impersonal ringtone. It was an unfamiliar international number, but it carried the scent of the sender of that white envelope. With emotionless, cool eyes, Alara swiped the screen. As expected, a long SMS message appeared. "I'm sorry. Last night, I showed you my most pathetic side, completely exposing my weakness to you. You don't have to tell me the truth. I know it's too much to ask now. After that, I retracted everything and left town in the middle of the night. I am the one who has lost everything. Alara, just hear one last thing from me. I will always pray for you both. Just please, live well and be healthy. The love we shared, however brief, was never a lie." It was the final summation of his ultimate self-pitying love and regret. For a fleeting moment, she wondered if she should feel anger at this man who, at the very end, was trying to write a neat, self-serving ending to his own tragedy, casting himself as the hero. But strangely, her emotions were as flat as a perfectly still lake. "This man still thinks he's the victim, and that I hold some small, lingering affection for him," she thought. How utterly pathetic. He and I were simply 2 different species who had a point of intersection in the past, now walking completely different timelines. Without scrolling down to read the rest of the long, apologetic message, Alara murmured, "I have no obligation to reply, and I don't need the stress of receiving notifications from you ever again." There was no hesitation. With a cool flick of her thumb, she tapped the block sender and delete data button in the top right corner of the screen. When the confirmation, "All data from this account has been deleted," appeared, the sound of the final chain from those 5 long years shattering to pieces resonated clearly and refreshingly within her. "Mommy, look, I zipped up my suitcase all by myself. Isn't that great?" Leo's proud voice, calling from across the bed, brightened the air. Alara turned, a radiant smile spreading across her face, the smile of an independent woman, free from all the dregs of the past, her head held high, ready to enjoy a beautiful new life. "That's wonderful. You're so handsome. Well then, Leo, let's say goodbye to Switzerland and go home to New York to do lots of drawing, okay?" A few days later, the flight from Zurich back to New York was a journey of supreme elegance and beauty, as if the bizarre events of the previous flight had been nothing but a bad dream. There was no creepy interference from anyone, no need to defer to anyone. "I am simply heading to a place I carved out for myself," Alara thought. From the sky, she and Leo looked down together at the thick, white expanse of the Alps. Ahead, on the bright new horizon, only the wings of glorious freedom and complete liberation spread out for her. The small nightmare named Ashford was now fully exorcised. From now on, only days of strong, unbreakable pride, filled with infinite brilliance and possibility, were promised to her.